Well, let's get to our first discussion. The Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry has preferred actionable solutions aimed at making the nation's economic landscape benefit businesses, strengthen economic growth and development. The president of the chamber, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, made these recommendations at the chamber's first quarter news conference in Lagos. He notes that the recent gross domestic product (GDP) figures highlighted commendable progress, gaps, and, of course, between current economic realities and 2025 budgetary goals, raised significant concerns, as according to the president. Mr. Idahosa added that the 2024 third quarter performance demonstrated resilience but revealed structural bottlenecks, especially in the non-oil productivity, industrial growth, and export capacity. For further analysis on this, the President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, joins me via Zoom to talk more about this afternoon, Friday afternoon. Mr. President, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you, Toro.
It's good to hear your voice this new year. Well, let's start with an overview of your report. Very rich report that touched on almost every segment of the Nigerian economy, from monetary policy issues to the reforms to tax reforms. We can go on and on. But let me ask this way. What message, if we could do a summary, is LCCI trying to pass for the first quarter of 2025, considering projections and reprojections of growth figures that we've seen in recent times?
The essential message is that the economy is starting 2025 on a much improved pedestal than the same time in 2024. So by the end of last year, we had achieved certain very important milestones. One is the near self-sufficiency in local production of refined petroleum products. Two is a significant stability in the exchange rates compared to where we were 12 months ago. The third is that we have begun to address a sustainable, very sustainable, foreseeable action to bring down inflation in the public transportation space through all the LNGs we are seeing, the LPG, the gas, auto gas, and even the electric vehicles that are being rolled out. So we can see down the road in 2025 that cost of public transportation will start to go down slowly. We can also see that the supply situation for refined products, refined petroleum products, has stabilized and will continue to stabilize. And we expect one or two more significant refineries to join the big and the small refineries that are currently in operation. Also, some of the reforms by government have begun to show traction. If you look at even basic things like student school fees around the loan, the NEL fund, there are very significant actions that are now in operation. We are not expecting them to happen. They're already happening. The CNG buses are already on the road. We're asking for more of them to bring down transportation costs. The student loan program is already running. We expect it to go much wider to reduce the burden of school fees on parents. So in every sector in the economy, there is traction that has started from the reforms. Even in infrastructure, a good number of roads have been completed. Here in Lagos, the red line is done. We can see two lines, blue line and red lines on. So generally, we are starting 2025 with a much better economic outlook than January 2024. So that's essentially the message. But even with that, the very high inflation rate, the very significant pervasive hunger in the land still looms over the country. So we have that cloud of high level of poverty and hunger, under which the silver linings I've just mentioned are beginning to emerge. So that's really the summary of the report.
All right, now let's take it a step further. You talked about profiling actionable solutions now to some of these problems that you've identified. Yes, there is still hunger in the land, of course, fallout of reforms and all of that. Mr. President, what are these solutions or some of these solutions that you think needs to be taken at this very time, considering our budget? And of course, you said that this reforms government need to follow through. So side by side, where do you think, or what are these solutions that you think government need to take at this very critical time?
The solutions are already emanating. It is just the speed and the skill. The speed and the skill that we are talking about. The speed and the skill. We want to see thousands and thousands of CNG buses rolling out. We want to see the refineries that are almost completed rolling out. We want to see the various infrastructure that can bring down the costs of transportation completed on time. So we are just looking for faster execution of existing efforts that have started in 2024. There are no other magic solutions that have not started that will make a difference. We just want a lot more speed in what is being done now. That's really the essence of the message.
Structural bottlenecks, especially in the non-oil space, and industrial growth and building export capacity is something that many are also talking about. For me, yes. I followed activities of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council, but in recent times, it's not been the way it used to be, like in those days of Mr. Awolowo and Dr. Ezra that has been there. At this time where we're supposed to position ourselves for the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, do you think we are doing enough as a country?
Yeah, I can say that because we work closely with the council. In the last quarter of last year, the first shipment of goods under the AFCFTA from Nigeria was done to 10 African countries. We were there. And since then, a lot of shipments have gone under the AFCFTA. As recent as last week, the shipment of goods from Nigeria arrived in Kenya, and some shipments have gone to countries like Uganda, Egypt. So yes, the media blast has not continued, but concrete action has continued. The exports are now moving to a couple of countries, and we expect that to grow as a lot more companies have gone through the process, the AFCFTA process, and they have been signed on, got the necessary approvals from the Export Promotion Council. We are aware that that is happening very, very effectively. We can say that because a lot of the exporters are either members of the LCCI or other organized private sector organizations, and the traction is there. But again, it's issue of scale. We need a lot more exporters, and the existing exporters of non-oil products need to do a lot more volumes. So it's a matter of scale. The export drive is catching up, but we need to do a lot more volume than what we are doing now. Really, in Nigeria now, the essential understanding of the things that will make the economy be transformed are understood. The private sector and the public sector are working to get this done, but the pace at which they are happening is where the emphasis should be. We need to get, for example, the export terminals are already operating. We need to get them to be faster. The dry ports, the inland dry ports, some of them are already operating. Some are almost finished. We need all the dry ports to be up and running so that the movement of goods for export will be faster. So generally, it's really now a matter of pace. That's why most economic analysts are looking at 2025 as the year that we will see the benefit of all the suffering that happened in 2024 when the reforms started.
Mr. President, let's touch on the our budget, because I also read in your speech you talked about oil production at 1.47 million barrels per day. Government is projecting 2.06 million barrels per day for our 2025 budget. Obviously, we know there is need for revenue to fund this spending plan for 2025. What do you make of this? A lot of efforts by government. Recently, there was a meeting with the Ogoni community and, of course, River State government to try and improve production and all of that. What do you make of that and the issue of crude oil theft, which we all agree is eating deep into the country's, the fabric of the country's economy?
No, I think that's what I refer to as the matter of skill between the government and the private sector. In the oil production space, oil production has gone up steadily, and that improvement is as a result of very close cooperation between governments, the oil producing communities, the security agencies, and the oil producing companies themselves. Oil theft is still existing, but is reducing significantly, mostly by the effort of the security agencies, supported by communities who now understand the need to protect the oil infrastructure. So that process is part of the general trend of our learning from what happened in 2024 and finding solutions. The meetings between the Ogoni community and all other stakeholders is not an isolated event. Similar events, consultations are going on all through the oil producing communities. You know, under the PIA, we have the host community trust funds. Almost every host community now have a trust fund where the funds are now being provided, not only provided, but carefully managed to begin to implement significant community development projects. Significant in the sense that the communities have a say in what projects are done. They are part of the trustees and the rest of the governance structure that ensure that those projects are relevant to the community needs. So you are beginning to see a gradual improvement in community relations in the oil producing, all of them across the Niger Delta. The incidences of community clashes are reducing, and we expect that to happen because they are now very well laid out structures. The foundation of that are the host community trust funds, which every community now has, and a culture of consultation between communities and all the oil producing companies. That culture has continued to be nurtured by the present government. So you are seeing fewer and fewer open clashes and community crises in Niger Delta communities. So that is why we are seeing the increase, and we expect all these efforts of consultation to consolidate on top of the divestment by the international oil companies to Nigerian oil companies in these same communities. The Nigerian oil companies are closer, they have a deeper understanding of the communities, and the communities are able to communicate, of course, much better with them. So we see a lot more prospects for increase of production to the 2.1, possibly more than that million barrels per day as the year unfolds.
That's a good one. Let's look at the issue of fiscal discipline that many have talked about, considering the reforms on one side. What do you also say, or what's the advice of LCCI to government in 2025? We can't continue to do things the same way and expect different results.
We definitely cannot. And that's why we emphasize that all the projections of rapid growth this year, whether it is 5.5 or 6.4 that government is projecting, or NESG or LCCI are projecting, are all based on certain fundamentals.
Yeah.
One of the first fundamentals is fiscal discipline. It's extremely important that we begin to see leadership by example when it comes to fiscal discipline at the federal government, at the state governments, at the local governments. All tiers of government are now getting a lot more funds, and we require very, very significant improvement and very, very transparent adherence to basic governance principles to ensure that, as you have said, we don't do things the old way. We don't continue with reckless expenditure or unrequired or unnecessary events at federal, state, and local governments and expect a different result. So the issue of fiscal discipline and very, very high level of transparency in government finances, in management or in public finance management is a very, very important requirement for these reforms to succeed. Otherwise, we will spend a lot of effort in these reforms and it will go down the drain because of lack of transparency and accountability in the way government resources are managed.
Before I let you go, Mr. President, let's look at the tax reforms. You know, we've gotten series of views around this, and finally the governors have given their nod. Yes, of course, we all know the sharing formula for VAT and all of that was the bone of contention, and that has been addressed now. But for you, the business community, all that concerns you in that bill, how would you react to that moving forward? What are your expectations as we expect that to be passed into law very shortly?
The business community understands that you need to significantly increase public revenues, government revenues, and taxation is one of the means of doing so. But the business community also says that you can only collect tax from profitable businesses. You can only collect tax when taxpayers have surplus income, disposable income after meeting their basic expenses. So in principle, because we work closely with the committee, the tax reform committee, throughout the one-year process, we agree fundamentally with all the principles that have now been laid before the National Assembly. But like any other proposed legislation, there are special interest groups that are looking at how it affects them, and they are bringing those issues to the table. This is to be expected. It is not possible for human beings, either here in Nigeria or anywhere, to design a perfect legislation. So the issues that are arising are expected, and there is a process of dealing with those issues. What is heartwarming now is that everybody is now going through that process. After the initial excitement, positive or negative, about the reform bills, everybody is now going through the process of consultations. Everybody, the private sector, the labor movement, the politicians, the governors, everybody is now doing the necessary consultations. So at the end of the day, when the law is passed, we will get the best at that time, at the time the law is passed, the best collective wisdom and consensus is what will be reflected at the time the law is passed. But what is certain is that after the law has been passed, there will still be amendments. And when we start applying the laws, there will be issues that will require amendments. I think it's important to stress this, that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to amending the laws to satisfy everyone. But the consensus will get to a point where everybody says, okay, this is good enough to be passed, let us pass it, let us start to implement it, and let us begin to deal with any issues arising. That is our view in the business community, that the reforms are absolutely necessary, but we cannot wait until it is perfect for everyone before it is passed. Let us pass it based on the best that we can do within the time frame we have given ourselves as a nation to get the law passed. And then we'll deal with annual amendments of the laws, which is normally provided in the annual finance acts.
So, finally, on the outlooks, both the projections from the LCCI, from the NESG, from the World Bank, and all that we've seen, what is your outlook for Nigeria's economy?
A much improved economy than last year in terms of the big figures, the GDP growth. There will be significant improvement. It is very likely it's a year where we begin to see a gradual reduction in inflation, particularly transport cost inflation. It's also a year where Nigeria will be moving more and more towards a producing economy and exporting economy from where it is that now as a primarily a consumer, a consuming and importing economy. Our import of goods and services are steadily rising and will continue to rise significantly. In some spaces like the creative industry, we are very significant exporters of goods and services. In the financial services industry, we are also major exporters of financial services to almost all African countries. So we are going to see export of goods and services rising significantly throughout the year. Hopefully that will begin to reduce the number of Nigerians at the end of this year that are still at the level of abject, what is described as multi-dimensional poverty. That is the general outlook.
I must thank you so much, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa. Always an interesting conversation with you. President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Do have a great weekend and hope to see you come into our studio very soon.
Thank you.
All right then. Well, we will take a break. When we come